One.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and this is my colleague, Tracy Priest.
Hey, everybody.
And we're with The Road to Retail, as you guys know. Today, we're going to talk about what to include in your marketing plan, okay, for your new, small, challenger, emerging brand. We already talked about what went into your presentation when you met with the retailer. The purpose of that meeting was to get distribution, right? And in that meeting, you touched on what you were going to do to drive awareness and trial. Because the only thing a retailer hates more than a product that doesn't sell is one that doesn't ship. They hate both of those things. Today, we're going to talk about how to sell them, okay? The marketing plan also needs to be relatively short. Okay, you can have a huge set of materials in your appendix if they really want to see your 9 pages of iterations from your website or talk about your influencer, blah, blah, blah. But the core of your meeting is going to be in this same 12 to 15 page range. And remember, it's a conversation. You're showing them exactly what they're doing, and you're watching for cues. Are they nodding? Do they get it? Do they know why you've picked XYZ to be an influencer? If they start going like, what? Slow down and talk about how that person has a real affinity for whatever it is you sell and why it makes sense. So you want to keep your deck pretty short, and you also want to be getting feedback. Okay. One thing that Tracy and I have learned the hard way is when you're showing your different marketing materials, a sentence to avoid is, what do you think? Because they might tell you. And if they don't like it for some reason, let's just say the font you selected for your packaging, are you really going to change it? Probably not. If you own 4 railroad cars full of cartons with that font, but you can say, this is our packaging and this is why we selected these things. If you've got some facts behind it, and move on. But asking, what do you think? Some people will shrug, others will feel compelled to give you lots of feedback, some of which you might not want to hear. And if you're not going to act on it, then you come forward and you didn't change anything. It sets up a little bit of discomfort. It's like, well, why'd you ask what I thought if you didn't change anything? Tracy?
Yeah, no, that's a great insight, Bruce. So the only thing that I would add there is just to make sure that you are prepared and that you can show your materials without asking for feedback. So I think that's the key point there. Make sure that you're really watching what you say very carefully and not asking for input. And then again, make sure that you are providing rationale for why you picked the pictures or the font, as Bruce said, or why the size of the font is the way that it is.
And before we move on, just a couple of things to build on what Tracy said there. Remember, folks, these buyers, they want a conversation. They don't want to attend a lecture. Don't read your deck. This is stuff where you have poured your heart and soul into, and I'll bet you know almost all of it by heart. So you can have your deck there as a leave behind, or to email it to them, or if you need a few things with a prompt, or if there's a question, but you want to have a conversation. You want that passion to come through, and you want to make sure that the story of your brand is going to translate into the tactics that you're about to show them. Sorry, Tracy.
No, that's okay. So Bruce, what you're saying is don't read your presentation page by page to the buyer?
Yes, that is generally not well received.
Exactly. So another component of your marketing plan is your consumer insights. And this is where you need to convince the buyer that you know your consumer. And you really want, in this part of your presentation, you want to make sure that you're telling them things that they couldn't possibly know. So if you've done some focus groups or you've tested the product, this is where you want to share that data. Make sure that you've got a tight consumer target, women 25 to 49 who go to yoga and love working out, whatever it is, it just needs to be very specific. That's what really the buyer wants to see, that you really know who your consumer is and share those insights with him or her.
Right. No, thanks, Tracy. And one of the things that you might show there when they talk about, tell me something I couldn't possibly know. If you've done some research, and all research doesn't need to take 4 years and cost $9 million, okay?
Right.
A lot of the CPG products that we're all talking about here, it really comes down to taste, performance, and price. So if you're making a food, you know, and it probably has a competitive set. I can't remember the last truly unique food category. I'm sure they're out there. But if you're going to come out with another protein bar, okay, taste, performance, price. If you did some head to head on taste, you know, show that. Say, hey, you know, we taste tested this against the 2 leading bars, and ours was preferred, you know, 6-1 in advance, or we deliver 9 times more protein, or it's been proven that the protein stays in the body of the athletes ingesting our protein for 20 extra minutes. I mean, but you got to prove this stuff. You can't just say it. But that's what it means by things they couldn't possibly know. And that rolls into what Tracy and I spend a lot of time talking about with any brand that either comes to us or, you know, seeks counsel, or brands we've worked on over the course of our career, including today. You have to be able to articulate the meaningful point of difference of your brand. Okay. Tracy and I spent a lot of time interviewing retailers when we did all this road to retail work up front. We interviewed retailers from about a dozen of the largest big box retailers in the country in the food, drug, mass trade. And one of the things we heard over and over was, I do not need another cut and paste brand. I need brands that are going to drive my category performance. And by that, if Tracy has a brand in and he gets his in and mine gets knocked out, if the performance of the category, and the category, folks, is where your product sits. So if you're in dry skincare, right? If Tracy's product goes in and mine comes out, but that category manager still only sells $100 total, Tracy's happy because he's in. The buyer might not be happy because they went through all the drama of trading out a brand and the category performance is the same. Remember, those buyers care about their category performance a lot and not so much about every individual brand. Big brands need to perform, right? They just need to perform because they carry so much weight. But even when a big brand wobbles, the small guys can pick it up because they're new, they're bringing people into the stores, they have better margin, they might have some innovation. But net, the whole sum, the category has to grow for the category manager to feel good about the decisions they've made and, frankly, how they'll be evaluated. Tracy?
So, yeah, I think also one of the things you want to communicate here is if you've got any certification. So, especially with in the natural channel, natural brands, you know, need to be non-GMO, organic. And that one thing I want to say here is know your category. So I'm working in a category now of honey, and every, you know, brand that we're looking at is at least certified non-GMO. So when we're launching a new brand into this category, that's the threshold. That's the minimum. And then if you can add organic or whatever other certifications. So that's another thing that you really want to make sure that you're communicating in your marketing plan is your certifications, which leads to what Bruce said, which is how is my brand different?
Mm-hmm. And one other thing to include in this part is not only are you telling how your brand is different, but why are consumers going to care, right? So maybe there's a cause, it supports St. Jude's, or it supports, you know, the rainforest, et cetera. Those kinds of things can be a really good tiebreaker, okay? But when it comes down to the absolute performance of the brand, is it turning, right? Is it selling? We talk about sell in, you've got an accepted by the retailer, everyone's really, really happy. That's when the hard work starts. Your marketing plan and your trade marketing plan, which we'll discuss on another day, that moves the product through. That's called a turn. When your product starts turning is when good things start happening for you. Tracy?
Again, Bruce, it's not about sell in, it's about sell through.
So true.
This is what you want to be able to communicate to the buyer is how are you going to pull the product off of the shelf and get it into the shopper's basket? So you're going to want to show them a marketing calendar of the events that you're doing. You're going to want to show your social media pages, your Facebook, your Instagram. I have 2.4 million followers. I have these influencers. I'm doing sampling at these events. And all of this is relevant because it ties back to my target consumer. My target consumer is females. Again, they go to gyms or yoga. Maybe you want to be sampling at a yoga event or being sampling at gyms and things like that. That's the kinds of events and things that the buyer is really going to want to see from your plan. And again, have a marketing calendar. I'm going to do this in January. I'm going to do this in February, so they can see that it's really well thought out.
Right. And as Tracy was saying, one of the other things when you start going through your tactics, you really need to be specific, because as a new brand, emerging brand, challenger brand, you know, you're not Pepsi walking in there where they know you're going to sponsor the Final Four and the Super Bowl and 15 other things. They don't want to hear, well, we're doing digital. Really? Where? With who? Okay. If you're a healthcare product, maybe you're going to do it on WebMD. If you're a healthcare product focused against athletes, you know, maybe you'll do it on some sort of training websites, but they're going to want to see that your plan is logical. If you're a sun care brand, do you advertise on vacation sites where people might need sun care? You know, you need to be specific. Same as Tracy said, sponsorships. What are you sponsoring? If you're a natural and organic product, are you involved with the right associations? Are you sponsoring, you know, local events? All these things, the buyer starts connecting the dots and, oh, okay, I see how all those things are a good match to their consumer. And there's enough of those people around here that also shop in my stores. I'm signing on here. Mentally, I'm on board to see how these folks do. Anything else there, Trace, before we move on?
Yeah, just an example too. And it doesn't have to be things that are expensive. Like I have a brand that work with that's a hot sauce brand, and they do NASCAR. So they go to a few NASCAR events. They have a little decal on one of the cars, and that's how they're reaching their consumers and building awareness. That's the kinds of things that you can do. That's not really expensive. I'm not saying that you have to be have your own car or be a NASCAR sponsor, but there's little things that you can do, events, sampling, to reach the consumer that will really resonate with the buyer. And it ties back to who is the brand consumer. Bruce?
Right. So another thing to bring in is our live examples of the materials you're going to use. So, you know, bring in screenshots of your website. To use Tracy's example of the hot sauce sponsorship, maybe a couple of still photos where it shows your logo on the car. If you have other research, like let's say you're a product that might be doing some very targeted detailing kits to doctors in the markets where this retailer is, you know, have an example, say, hey, we're sending this out to, 400 ophthalmologists here in St. Louis. Oh, okay, good. We do a lot of business in St. Louis. That makes sense to us. And it's an eye care brand. I get it. Again, we already talked about, be careful to say, what do you think? You know, you're here to show this is what we're doing. This is why it makes sense. If you did, this is how we tested it. I would also show a lot of retailers these days. There's a lot of pressure to get involved with their online platforms, right? They all see Amazon growing at 70% and their advertising services unit with margins of 70%. And everyone goes, hey man, I want some of that too. So a lot of times now getting new distribution, you have to make some commitment to a retailer's digital play if they have one, and most of them do. So you're going to need to have some content made professionally that looks good, package shots with the right claims underneath it or copy points. If need be, you can put some video up there if you have influencers. And we've seen people do really creative stuff, as Tracy said, that doesn't have to cost a fortune, right? But you need to work with people that, know how to upload these things and it doesn't get lost in the sauce. Again, part of our surveys, we had retailers tell us that they accepted products and the products never made it to the shelf because the brands couldn't get organized. They couldn't fill out the new product forms. They couldn't upload their digital assets into the website. And they said, you know what, I'm moving on. So make sure that you have these examples of your work that they can touch and see. Again, it lets them know that as a small emerging challenger brand, you're real. You are real. Tracy?
Absolutely. Hey, I just want to add one thing. I just saw just the other day that a retailer put out a broadcast that said that they're now charging a penalty to brands who are accepted, but that do not ship and get to the planogram. And the fine is $10,000.
Now there's a negative ROI.
Yes. So throw that out there for our audience that's listening today.
Yeesh.
So last but not least, you also want to show packaging, whether it's in person or, on a Zoom call, want to show the packaging, and you want to make sure that it's a live sample, no mock-ups, no renderings, that it's the real life packaging with the right, drug facts, ingredients, the UPC, a real live product, because that's what the buyer wants to see. They want to know that this is real and that you've actually made the product that you're selling to them.
Right. And one other thing to include in this marketing plan is what Tracy and I call a site bite. You want to lay out a calendar for the year showing your different activities. So if you imagine the horizontal axis at the top is the months, and down the vertical axis are the different tactics. So you want to show like when you're going to do a price reduction, when your search activities will be going on, when will you have your digital marketing going? If you're sponsoring, back to Tracy's NASCAR, at what races might you be sampling? You want to give them a picture that if it's a non-seasonal item, that you're going to have pressure against the consumer all year. And if you are a seasonal item, such as, I don't know, marshmallows or an allergy product, that's probably a pretty tight window of when people are sitting around campfires, or allergy season in the fall and spring, that you're clustering your pressure at the times of year when they want to be selling this stuff. So you want to make sure it is logical and it's laid out. Plus, that's something that they can go back and refer to. The brands I work on, I've always kept two calendars: my marketing calendar with pressure against the consumer, and my trade calendar for my top retailers to know what's happening at the shelf at the time. Tracy, anything to add there before we roll into the big finish?
Nope, I don't think so, Bruce. I think this has been great. I hope our audience has found it helpful. And please continue to follow us on our road to retail. You can look at our past episodes where we've interviewed friends and colleagues in the industry, and also talk about other relevant topics in consumer packaged goods. And you can find that on Spotify, iTunes, or also on our LinkedIn page. Thanks for joining us today.
Good luck out there.